Hello everyone, welcome to the last part of acute renal failure. Now we'll look into the different indices and the conclusive part of acute renal failure. Now we have a renal failure indices, that is to estimate that what is the severity of renal failure. So we have this equation where the index can be calculated by measuring the concentration of sodium by the urine creatinine and serum creatinine ratio. Also, urine and serum laboratory values for pre-renal and renal causes of acute renal failure are enumerated here. So, if the BUN creatinine ratio for pre-renal causes stays to be more than 20, whereas for renal causes it's less than 20. Also, the fractional sodium level is less than 1% in pre-renal, and for renal it's more than 1%. Also, the renal failure index is less than 1% and more than 1% in renal causes. Urine sodium level says to be less than 20 and in renal causes is more than 40. Specific gravity in pre-renal causes is high, whereas in renal causes it's quite low. Also, we can go for urine analysis, where the dipstick method for blood protein suggests a renal inflammatory process. Microscopy may also help to show cell cast and crystals present in urine. Also, RBC, if present in urine, may be due to glomerulonephritis, vasculitis, HUS-TTP, scleroderma crisis. These are the causes for which RBCs may be present. And obviously, RBC in urine is obviously related to any injury to the glomerular structure. Urine cast may also be present, like hyaline cast is present for pre-renal acute renal failure. Granular in cases of acute tubular necrosis, but the depositions are muddy brown in color. Red blood cell cast, as in the cases of glomerulonephritis, vasculitis, malignant hypertension. And WBC cast may also be present. RBC cast, uh, you can see as in the picture, is a typical finding of glomerular bleeding. So, as we all know, that the formed elements of blood are not filtered through the glomeruli, but any injury to the glomeruli will obviously lead into a bleeding and presence of RBC in urine. Also, white blood cells may be present. As you can see histologically on microscopic examination of urine how they will appear. Pigmented granules, as I said, in cases of acute tubular necrosis, muddy brown colored granules may be present. Urate crystals, oxalate crystals, and also eosinophilia may be present. Hematologically, full blood count, blood film, that is eosinophilia, may be present in acute interstitial nephritis, cholesterol embolization, and vasculitis. Thrombocytopenia, red cell fragments such as thrombotic microangiopathies that we have seen there, TTP and HUS. Coagulation studies may help in disseminated intravascular coagulation associated with sepsis. Also, immunological examination for anti-nuclear body, anti-double stranded antibody. ANA is positive for systemic lupus erythematosus and other autoimmune disorders. DNA antibodies and anti-double stranded DNA antibodies are more specific for SLE. C3 and C4 complements are low in SLE, acute post-infectious glomerulonephritis, and cryoglobulinemia. ASO and anti-DNase be titer, high after streptococcal infection. ANCA might also be present, so it's associated with systemic vasculitis, Wegener's granulomatosis, as we have considered this a number of times, and anti-GBM antibodies are present in good pastures disease. Serological testing for hepatitis B and C and HIV serology may also be done. Radiology, renal ultrasonography is done for renal size, symmetry, and evidence of any obstruction. We look into the post or pre-renal causes. Pylography for localization or to understand where exactly is the localization of the problem. And other imaging techniques of sonography and magnetic resonance for atrial and venous obstruction may be carried on. Some new markers like cysteine C protein, as we have seen how cysteine C is useful as it is completely reabsorbed from the circulating in the tubules, it is completely reabsorbed. So this might be also used as a marker. It is filtered and completely reabsorbed, and any change in the serum level occurs sooner if there are some problem with its absorption. Now let us look into the complications of acute renal failure. The first is hyperkalemia. There is increased amount of potassium. There is metabolic acidosis, tumor lysis syndrome, and rhabdomyolysis. Metabolic acidosis can lead to wide Ag differences, that is, a albumin globulin difference might increase. Lactase acidosis, sepsis, liver disease, ketosis can lead into metabolic acidosis. Hyperphosphatemia and hypocalcemia, cardiopulmonary disorders like arrhythmia, pericarditis, pericardial effusion, pulmonary edema might also be seen. Decreased erythropoiesis might lead into anemia, and also hemolysis, bleeding, and less IPC survival and hemodilation might lead into anemia. Platelet dysfunction and decreased number of platelets might lead into bleeding, and coagulation factor abnormalities might also lead into bleeding. Other complications might be hyperuricemia, infections like pneumonia and sepsis, GIT symptoms of nausea, vomiting, malnutrition, GI bleeding, that is gastrointestinal bleeding, and mental changes, seizures, and hystrixis are associated with the mental symptoms. Also, uremic syndrome might also be seen. How to prevent acute renal failure? We need to recognize patients who are at risk, that is post-operative state, cardiac surgery, and septic shock patients would be at a higher risk. Prevent progression from pre-renal to renal and preserve renal perfusion, that is isovoluemia, cardiac output, normal blood pressure need to be maintained. And we need to avoid nephrotoxins like aminoglycosides and amphotericin. Now, what are the general protocol for management? How do we manage such cases? First of all, we need to look into the underlying causes of the disease, and we need to strictly monitor the amount of fluid intake and output. Intake and output of fluid need to be monitored. Also, monitoring the serum electrolyte level, as we have seen, the variation in sodium level can cause a lot of alteration, as that would be maintaining the blood pressure, and eventually it would be the blood pressure would be affecting the renal perfusion. And if there are some medications which is affecting GFR, we need to maintain or adjust that too. Nephrotoxic drug need to be avoided, and attempt to convert Oliguric, non-oliguric renal failure. Fluid therapy, if patient is fluid overloaded, fluid restriction is done, and renal replacement therapy might be used. If patient is dehydrated, restore intravascular volume first, treat euvolemia, and if patient is euvolemic, restrict to insensible losses, plus losses in urine and chest tubes, etc., can be used. Most patients, for sodium levels, how do we maintain? Most patients have dilutional hyponatremia, which should be treated with fluid restriction, and severe hyponatremia, that's less than 125 milliequivalent. Dialysis and hemofiltration is suggested. For potassium level, how to treat hyperkalemia, which could be present. Oliguric renal failure is often complicated by hyperkalemia, increasing the risk of cardiac arrhythmia, and its treatment should be administration of sodium bicarbonate, insulin, hypotoxic dextrose, sodium polystyrene, and dialysis may be used. For management also of metabolic acidosis, sodium bicarbonate is used, hyperphosphatemia, phosphate binders, sevelamer is used, hypocalcemia, calcium carbonate is used, nutrition restriction of protein diet that is less than 0.8 gram per kg per day is suggested. That was all for acute renal failure. Uh, we'll look into the other possibilities and diseases of kidney in later lectures. Thank you for listening.